Chicago, Indianapolis, welcome, welcome. Denver, Ohio, Fort Lauderdale. Thank you guys for joining us. Germany. Houston, Texas. Welcome. Okay, so maybe one more minute, then we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, you can use the chat box to introduce yourselves as I about to introduce myself and get this webinar started this afternoon. So I can go ahead and get it started. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Tariq Daniels and welcome to the latest Power Series today. I am the founder and executive director of Western America. We are a healing justice social movement that provides mental health awareness and suicide prevention to communities of color through art, advocacy, and affirming care. And we like to have a focus on women, youth, and LGBTQIA plus persons. Western America is partnering with the Black AIDS Institute today to bring you sessions linking race, gender identity, HIV health, and mental health in a way that empowers and moves us to advocate for one another and ourselves. Today, I am joined by Wahida Shabazz El. Wahida is an African-American Muslim woman and retired postal worker who was diagnosed with HIV in 2003. She serves as a board member for the AIDS Law Project of PA, the steering committee member for U Equals U, and advisory board member for the Cero Project. She is employed by the Philly Fight as its Goodwill Ambassador. Wahida is also a longtime member of ACT UP Philadelphia and founding member of the Positive Women's Network USA. Currently, Wahida is Director of Community Engagement for the Reunion Project, where she is leading an HIV long-term survivor alliance. Wahida areas of expertise include community organizing, public speaking, HIV criminalization, HIV aging, reproductive justice, faith in HIV, and electoral organization. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and turn this session over to the incredible Wahida for her expertise. She will share a few words about owning your own narrative today. We also have time after her presentation for a Q&A, so please feel free to ask any questions using our Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Wahida, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tariq. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. I want to thank the Black AIDS Institute, and I also want to thank What's in the Mirror for inviting me here to speak. And I want to thank everybody that came. You all are chatting up, and I love you. I love you all too. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. And so I want to talk a little bit today about making our stories have impact. And I come to this work as a woman living with HIV, and I've been asked a number of times to tell my story, especially when I first was diagnosed. I was asked, and I would share my story a lot. And I realized once I learned more about advocacy, that there was more I could do with my story other than just saying, I slept with somebody and here I am. So hopefully this will help all of us to understand that our stories have power and how we can make our personal political. And so just to talk about public speaking a little bit, commonly public speaking is understood to be a person talking to a group, a single person talking to a group of listeners. For me, my first public experience, a public speaking experience, was on the microphone. I used to lead chants. I was on a megaphone. I was leading chants for ACT UP Philadelphia, ACT UP, Fight Back, Fight AIDS. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? ACT UP, Fight Back. With PWN, with women with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. So my first public speaking experiences was actually leading chants through a megaphone. And then my most memorable public speaking experience, many of you may have been there, was in 2010 when I was able to deliver the closing plenary address at the International AIDS Conference. The International AIDS Conference is a high-profile media event, and it reaches leaders all over the world. So that was my most memorable experience. I'm going to tell you, I think in 2008, I got to speak at the grave of Dr. King and Dr. Coretta Scott King. And then I thought in that moment, that was my greatest moment ever. But then when I got to the International AIDS Conference, it really became real to me just how impactful my story could be. And so public speaking, it's evolutionary. It was evolutionary for me. Like I said, I started off just being a chanter, and then I ended up being like this really great speaker. But I got a lot of training in between and a lot of practicing in between. You know, so there's a lot of broad dynamics to being a public speaker. It could be formal, like what I'm doing today. It can be kind of informal, like I'm doing today. It can also be impromptu. Somebody could just say, hey, can you just come and say a few words? It could be in person, it can be virtual. We can even do it pre-recorded now, right? We can use disability justice approaches, meaning we can use multiple languages or sign language. We can have multiple presenters, like on a panel. We can have multiple groups now that we can do podcasting, and we can use social media platforms like we're StreamYarding today. And also we can also do pre-recordings to be reviewed later on. So public speaking has taken on a lot of broader dynamics. So whenever I'm asked to share my story, there's a few things that come to mind. The first thing I think about is, how can I use this opportunity to deliver my message? I didn't used to think about that, but that's what I think about now. Or they want me to share my story. How can I use this opportunity to deliver a message? How can I make my personal story political? And what's happening in the HIV community that I need to relay, that I need to let this audience know about? Do I need to talk about HIV criminalization, reproductive rights? And then the other thing I think about is, how can I bring the audience along? Beyond telling my story, I go my way, they go their way. How can I keep the audience engaged? How can I give the audience something to do once we're done, that they can promote and help the cause, help my cause? Those are the first three things I think about. Because I'm more than my diagnosis, right? So I come in with, when people ask me to speak or tell my story, I come in with my own agenda. And I use my speaking engagements as teachable moments. Some of you have been with me, have known me for a long time, and so you know that to be true. And I always offer the audience a way to become a part of the solution. That's very important, that we bring the audience along with us, right? We have to let them know what's at risk, what's at stake, how is it going to impact all of us. So here's an example of a statement that can tell the audience, this is about COVID. If I say to the audience, not having honest and accurate information about how to prevent COVID-19 puts all our families at risk. And that's an injustice to all of us. What I've just done is I have moved people, I have moved the needle. Sometimes people may not agree with your cause, but if you include them and let them know what the risk is and what's at stake, you can actually, maybe you don't get them to come all the way over, but you can actually get them to move to the middle. Here's another statement that talks about what's at risk and what's at stake. Information on new methods of protecting ourselves from contracting HIV, such as PrEP for all genders and U equals U, is resulting in less spread, much healthier communities, and we are getting closer to the cure. So again, what's at risk, what's at risk, what's at stake. So new methods around HIV prevention is helping all of our communities. We all want healthier communities, and we all want to get closer to a cure. Now, depending on who my audience is, I wouldn't use those acronyms. I wouldn't say U equals U. I would say undetectable equals untransmittable. And I wouldn't say PrEP. I would say pre-exposure prophylaxis. So knowing our audience also helps us to know just what the tone that we're going to use when we're speaking. So another thing that I think about when people ask me to speak is, who is their audience? Where is the event going to be held? How many people are expected to attend? I may want to give out handouts. And what's the goal of their program, and why do they need me? Am I the right speaker for this program? How long is the event going to be? How long am I expected to speak? Because just because the event is 2 hours doesn't mean I'm going to speak for 2 hours. I may only speak for 20 minutes. And what's the impact the issue is going to have on the community? So that's something else that I think about. I particularly think about who's the audience. Who am I going to be speaking to? That's really important to know your audience. And that helps me to craft my message. If I know, the more I know about the person who's going to be listening to me, the better I can craft my message. And it also helps me determine the level of information I'm going to give. It helps me determine my choice of words. So if I'm talking to people living with HIV and people who are allies, I could say things like T cells, lab work, a protest, the caucus, viral loads, and they will probably know what I'm talking about. But when I'm talking to decision makers and people who may not be living with HIV, and I also want to make sure I'm always using people first language. You're not going to hear Wahida Shabazz say HIV positive people. You're going to always hear me say people with HIV. So I'm going to use people first language no matter who I'm talking to, but particularly if I'm talking to people who are not people living with HIV, I'm going to make sure that I say that. If I'm talking about HIV risk, I'm going to describe the highest risk to the lowest risk. I'm not going to start talking about breast milk and then the mic gets cut off, right? The microphone, the power goes out, and I'm talking about breast milk, and people walk away thinking, oh, well, you just get it from breast milk. I'm going to always start with the highest risk to lowest risk, particularly if I'm talking to people who are not living with HIV. I'm going to avoid using words like clean and dirty. Clean and dirty has nothing to do with contracting HIV or treatment or care. And of course, I'm going to avoid using acronyms. And I want to connect with my audience. And that's something that I learned. Actually, I really was very effective when I did the speech in 2010 at the International AIDS Conference. How I connected with the audience that day, I used words like, as your positive sister in this world. I wanted to connect with people. If I'm going to talk to people of faith, I would say, as a person inspired strongly by faith. I want to connect with the audience. I'm already knowing who the audience is. As a person who is a gender non-conforming person, as a parent of a gay teen, as a person who knows the pain of losing a sibling, whoever your audience is, we want to find ways to connect with that audience. There's a reason why they asked you to be the speaker, but you have to find out who the audience is so you can connect with that audience. As a person who was formerly incarcerated, as a returning citizen, so I want to make a connection with the audience. And if anyone who's ever been to any of my trainings, you know that I live on values words, because value words makes the it makes the difference to an audience when you use words that people value. As human beings, we all value, it doesn't matter where we grew up or what our ethnicity is, we all value some of the same things. As human beings, we all value truth and fairness. We value good health, we value redemption. Some people only value things that are cost effective. So if I'm talking to a politician, I'm going to talk about how much money this is going to save you. how cost effective this is going to be. So knowing your audience, that way you can know which value words that you're going to use. People like everybody values integrity, humility, dependability. So when you're delivering your talk, anytime that you can put these words in anywhere, it's going to be a draw that you can draw people to your side. Like I said, people may not agree with what you're saying totally, and they don't have to totally agree. You just need to bring them over to the middle, at least bring them over a little bit. And we can do that by using values words. And this is big, to make our story not just all about me, but how it impacts all of us, right? Make your story not just about how when I contracted HIV, right? So I'll start with the one at the bottom. I didn't think my mother could become HIV positive. I thought only young people like me were at risk. Comprehensive health education that covers risk at various stages of our lives may have helped my mom and a lot of other parents to protect themselves. That is the impact. That is the risk, right? So when we're giving our messages, and not just to make this story about my mother, but to make this story about a lot of other folks' parents, if we had just had that information. Here's another example of how we can make our stories not just about us. When more families engage in embracing family members who may be gay or living with HIV, we create safe communities free from stigma, and we all benefit from non-discrimination and safety. So to be able to use our stories, to be able to bring the audience along, to be able to use our stories to make it not just about us, but to make about what would happen if, right? What's the impact? So we make our story, we make the personal political. We make the personal political. I hope I'm helping somebody. And I just wanted to stop and say, I can't really see the chats and stuff like that, but I know I have a lot of staff around the Black AIDS Institute and What's in the Mirror. They're watching the chats, and I'm happy to answer questions when we get to end. So there is a Q&A, but I hope I'm helping. I hope that some of this information is going to be good for you all. And I need to say, yes, the messenger matters. Yes, the messenger matters. We should always have a pool of spokespersons trained so that younger audience, you can send a younger speaker to a younger audience. People experiencing drug addiction often respond better to a person who's been in recovery. Older people may connect better with other older folks or even people of faith. Trans communities members may connect better with persons of trans experience, right? So we have to remember that the messenger does matter. Black people audience may connect better to a person who looks like them. So the messenger does matter. So if you have organizations and you have one single spokesperson, you're limiting yourself, because you should train multiple spokespersons and have a pool to select from. You never know who's going to ask you to speak. Oh, wait. They asked me to speak, but I don't think they offer me an honorarium. And what is the honorarium? Honorarium is when I get compensation for my time. My time is valuable. We're worth it. Our time and our experiences are valuable, and we should be compensated for our time. I'm not saying you're going to get compensated every single time, right? But think about the time that you have to prepare to do your presentation. Time you may have to be on a planning call with the organization. You may have to be on the call with them for an hour. You may have 1 or 2 calls. You have to get on a half hour early to take care of all the technology. And what support that I may need just to make sure I show up. I may have to park. I may need gas. Maybe I have to come in an Uber. I may need transportation support. I may have to get a babysitter, or maybe I'm taking care of a sick loved one that someone has to sit with while I come out to do this speaking engagement. I want to look nice, so maybe I got to get my clothes out the cleaners, right? I want to have my hair nice. You want to look at my nails. See that? Yeah, but so I want to look nice. So I have some things that I may need to support me, just to allow me to be able to show up. My personal grooming, internet connection, right? Internet connections oftentimes are not free. I may have to reschedule a date with my partner to be able to be available to speak to this group. and then compensation for the time. So I'm just saying that, so if people ask you to speak and if they don't offer you an honorarium, let me be very clear. I don't want anyone leaving here saying, well, he just said you have to get paid for every single time for every single thing you do. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that if you are not offered an honorarium, it's okay to ask. Sometimes we have not because we ask not. I remember a woman, I think she was from Louisiana. She was so excited. Oh, Wahida, they want me to come to Chicago. They want me to speak in Chicago. They want to pay my airfare. They're going to put me in a hotel. Of course they are. Yeah, of course they are. I said, but did you ask them like for an honorarium? Oh no, you think I should? Yes, I absolutely think you should. And they gave her a nice honorarium. She was able, I mean, they gave her enough like to pay her rent for that month. They gave her a nice honorarium. So sometimes it's okay to ask. And sometimes we just have to do it from the muscle. And I have to tell you, because sometimes I say do it from the muscle. What muscle? Sometimes we do it from the heart, right? Because sometimes you can get exposure and maybe another group may offer you an honorarium, that you may get other speaking engagements. But if they're not offering you an honorarium, folks, it's okay to ask. And if they don't have it, then it's fine. But if they have it, then you tell them you'll be happy to accept it. And that's what Wahida said. So I don't want to hear no rumors about Wahida said. I need to say this one more time. I have a friend who I kind of explained this concept to. I said, you know, you're valuable. You need to be asking for something. That person went out and almost ruined my reputation. Wahida, I threw you under the bus. I told them that you said no. Wahida didn't say you have to get paid every single time. But Wahida did say it's okay to ask for an honorarium if it hasn't been offered to you. And we're worth it. Who else can tell your story but you, right? Hey, I learned this too. Maybe I need a rider. What's a rider? Okay, so we've agreed that I'm going to come and speak. We've agreed how long I'm going to speak. I know who the audience is, but suppose I have to go out of my pocket to actually get there and be able to speak, to perform, more or less, right? When a person in the performance world, a person who's a celebrity, when they're asked to do something, they usually ask for a writer, and that means the compensation for my out-of-pocket costs. It's a condition. It's like added to a contract or is added to an agreement, right? But it can address a lot of things that you may need. But it's actually called a rider, and I'm going to tell you just what a rider can cover. It can cover incidentals, small or large incidentals. Here's a big one. I've been asked to travel a lot of places, and sometimes I'm coming in late to the hotel. I may get in after 10. I may get in after 11. Everything's closed. I haven't had dinner. So sometimes when you can ask that, I'm coming in late. Could you please have a deli sandwich and some sparkling water in the room when I get there, or at the front desk, so I don't have to go to bed hungry. I don't have to wander around trying to find something to eat. Technology, you can ask, can you cover the internet in the room? Because if the people who are asking to speak, if they don't cover the internet in the room, that becomes an out-of-pocket cost for you. And they're making your reservations, they're making your travel arrangements, they're making your lodging arrangements. You can request a room near the elevator or an accessible room or a room on a higher or lower floor. I've even asked people when they made airline flights for me, I tell them, I said, I need to be on an aisle seat with my right leg extended. That lets them know I want to know, that means I want to sit on the left side of the plane. I want to sit on the aisle with my right leg extended. I had surgery on my right leg. I need my right leg extended. So this is what you call a rider, things that's going to make you comfortable as the person who's going to be doing the speaking. Also, ground transportation is a big thing. They may not want to offer you ground transportation from your home to the airport, but it's okay to ask for ground transportation from the airport to the venue and back to the airport. If you don't ask for it, then that's another expense that will come out of your pocket. So these are referred to as riders. Even though you have already made the agreement that you're going to be there, it's okay to add on a rider. Whoever that person is taking care of your logistics for that organization, you can say these are some things that will make me able to better perform, or better to be able to give you what it is that you're asking me to do. because we're only human, right? And so the point of everything that I've shared with you so far is this. I want us to avoid agreeing to speak and then leaving feeling empty. I want us to avoid agreeing to speak and then leaving feeling empty. Because every time we are asked to share our story, re-traumatization happens. And I'm sure that the people asking you to speak, they don't mean you any harm. They just don't understand how it is, like having a sword that's healed, and then just when it's about to heal, the scab comes off, right? So we reopen old wounds when we tell our stories. We may have feelings of low self-esteem can creep back in. It's going to be a very unsettling experience sometimes. So everything that I've said to you thus far, even though I have given you some content about um, about value-based messaging, but a lot of things I've said to you so far is I want you to avoid agreeing to speak and feeling empty. Because when I first got diagnosed with HIV, and I was asked, especially as a Muslim, they want to say, oh, wow, she's a Muslim. She has HIV. Let's get her to come over and speak. And I would speak, and I would leave feeling very, very empty. Sometimes I would leave and I was hungry. Sometimes I would leave and I didn't have car fare to get where I had to go because I didn't know how to ask, right? So to avoid feeling empty, ask for what you need. When people ask you for what they need from you, it's okay for you to ask them what you need from them. And this is what makes me feel great because I always give the audience a way to help my cause. This is really important. I found this makes me feel great. When I ask, because once you tell your story, once we tell our stories, if you look in the eyes of the audience, they're willing at that moment. They are so willing to help do something for your cause. But if we don't ask them to do anything, they hug us, they kiss us, they pray for us, they wish us well wishes, they give us well wishes. But they are at that moment if you ask them to do something. And that's why I'm asking you to sign this petition. And that's why I'm asking you to write to your political representative. Make the ask. Anyone who's trained with me know I say this all the time. Don't just go tell your story and not use that opportunity to make an ask. And that's why I want you to vote for me. Make an ask. And that's why I want you to come to the rally. It could even be, and that's why I want you to invite me back, because I really want to, there was some more things I wanted to say. Maybe I ran out of time. That's why I'm asking you to use your social media to denounce all kinds of injustices. Make an ask. People are willing to help. Once you tell your story, folks are willing to ask. And that's why I'm asking you to be more supportive of your family members who may be living with HIV. Make an ask. Because when I make an ask, this is how I feel. When I know that my story's been impactful, when I know that I have used the opportunity to deliver a message, I've connected with my audience, my story had impact, I relayed what's happening in the HIV community, I've used my value-based messaging, I brought the audience along, I gave the audience some specific ways that they can help my cause, and I received the honorarium. I feel like a superhero. I feel like a superhero. So here's just a few tips for public speaking, just some things just to improve our public speaking. Many of you here are public speakers. So what makes a good public speaker? Of course, knowledge of the issue, having confidence, and you get that by practice. You get confidence by practice. You can practice in front of your peers. You have to be willing to accept when they give you criticism, when they give you criticism that you can make yourself better. So practice to improve your practice to improve your, because everybody don't know. So just practice makes you a good public speaker. To be nervous is normal, I used to, and he know who he is. I'm not going to say his name, but some of you may know who he is. We have a colleague from Ohio. And the first time I think I went there to the Black Lives Matter convening. It was the first time I sat on the panel with this person. I didn't know he was so nervous. And I remember and he had his talk on papers. Every time he read a point, he would throw the paper around, and he would look like this guy here. And he was like, when he got done, there were like papers all over the place. But it's normal to be nervous, and when you practice to prepare, the more you practice, the more you'll be less nervous, and you'll be better able to connect with your audience. Let your personality come through. People know, they will trust you better if they know that you're a real person. So let your personality come through. Keep it real. And this is important. Don't put your audience to sleep, right? So you want to grab your attention of the audience in the beginning and in the end. Now, if you notice, I started this presentation purposely without an overview. I didn't want to start with an overview. Instead, I started with telling you about my first speaking engagement and what was the most meaningful speaking engagement for me. How many of you have heard people start a speech with, "Today I'm going to talk about"? For me, that's going to put me to sleep like right away. Don't put your audience to sleep. Grab the attention at the beginning in the first 30 seconds if you can. And even in the end, you will also want to give them something. When you leave, you want to give them something to remember as your closing statement as well. Yeah, I just said that concludes your speech with a strong statement that your audience is sure to remember, which I do plan to do for this gracious audience. Organize your materials in an effective way to attain your purpose. Create a framework for your speech. Make sure to grab the audience attention in the first 30 seconds. You can use humor. Using humor is always an effective language. The audience will generally like a person who gives a personal touch in their speech. Any story you can provide, any little stories you could think of along the way as you're doing your speech, it will hold your audience attention. And don't read unless you just need to read to stay on point. But you want to try to maintain some eye contact with your audience. You just can't be a person who's standing there just reading and never making eye contact with your audience. And if sometimes you can use 3x5 cards if you need to like have a little something. Don't go up with a whole sheet of paper. Use little 3x5 cards. You can flip those very quickly and nobody will ever know the difference. And use visual aids wisely. Visual aids are really good, but if you have too many, you're going to be confusing the audience. You don't need everything. If you're going to have a PowerPoint, then use the PowerPoint. If you're going to have the visual aids, you just don't need too much, right? Because it can take the attention from the audience. It could take the attention away, and you really want the audience to be focused on what you're trying to do, the message that you're trying to deliver. So visual aids are good, but you don't need everything that's on the market. And the response that you want when you're done speaking is, "Wow, I think I agree with you. How can I help you?" That's the response that you want. And that's when you're able to give them something that they can do to help your cause. So remember, your talk is not over until you offer the audience a way to support your cause. So when people are asking you to speak, think about what it is that I can ask this audience to do for my cause when I'm done. It may be give a donation. It could be something like that, because a lot of times people, you may bring them over. Maybe you don't bring them all the way over. Maybe they won't come to the rally, but they'll give a donation. And we need money to fund our revolution. Okay, so I want to thank you for your kind attention, and I do approve this message. My name is Wahid Shabazz. It's been great. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Tariq.
Thank you so much, Wahida, for that very, very informative presentation. As someone who's still learning and practicing my public speaking skills, that was definitely and I plan right now, like so and so I definitely learned a lot and valued a lot what you said. I did have a question, and I want to tell the audience as well that the Q&A is open. So if you guys have any questions that you want to ask Wahida, or anything like that, make sure you can go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A feature. So I had a question for you, Wahida. When we're thinking about, like, today's topic is owning our own narrative.
Yes.
How would you, what should people think about when they're deciding what to tell, when they're telling about their story? You brought up trauma and being re-traumatized.
Yeah.
What should we ask ourselves when we're thinking about what's maybe too much to share with the audience about our story, or what's not impactful enough? Like, do you have any tips about that, of what we should tell?
I think it's okay to be vulnerable. You have to be a little vulnerable to your audience. You can't be so rigid that the people feel like that you're just hiding something, right? So sometimes I would share like where I fumbled. I would share, I remember once when one of the first interviews I did with the newspaper in Philadelphia, I was supposed to say, this was my, because we always come with the message. The message was, abstinence only hasn't worked in 6,000 years. It's not going to work now. That was the message I was supposed to say to this newspaper. And they asked me something about, do you think all men cheat? Or do you think men cheat? Or something like that. And I answered the question. I'm like, yeah, all men cheat, right? And that's what made it to the paper. Wahida Shabazz says all men cheat, you know? And I ran around and listen, and I have 2 sons. I ran around, and it was in the Sunday paper. I ran around the corner and bought every paper in the store. And my sons will not notice unless they're on this webinar today, or unless one of y'all go back and tell them. I ran around and bought every paper from the neighborhood, every Sunday paper I could find, because I was so embarrassed that I had screwed up. Because that was the big headline. Shabazz says all men cheat. So I think being vulnerable to let people know that, you know, I didn't wake up like this. This took work. This took practice. It takes practice. So I think being vulnerable is a way of like, how much am I going to say? How little am I going to say? And I think that, and I saw you smile, Tariq, and I'm sure others smile. And so that's what you want. You want people to know I'm a real person, and I'm connecting with you, and I make mistakes. So I think that would be the answer to that question. Thank you.
That's perfect. So we have a few questions here in the Q&A. And so one is, can you provide your contact information? So we'll make sure before we end this webinar, if you can make sure we put your contact information in the chat box. So
hey, Tammy Hart, can you give them my contact information, please? Okay. She keeps talking to me. wahida-the-legend@gmail.com.
So our first question is, how do you decide how much to ask for an honorarium? I think that's a very hot topic with people in this conversation.
You know, so I look at, so I don't know that I've ever asked for a specific thing for honorarium, but generally I would expect, it depending on how academic you are, I need to say that. If you're an academic and if you have a PhD, they're going to more than likely automatically offer you something. It's going to be much more than you're going to get if you're a person with if you're a certified peer educator or something like that. Mm-hmm. Generally, I expect to get between $100 and $150. It all depends. If they're asking me to talk for 20 minutes, then I'm expecting about $125. If they want me to talk for 45 minutes, then I'm expecting $200. So that's why you want to know, well, how long do you expect me to speak? Right? And then, you know, and if they don't, and I spoke with the organization here, and I know they got plenty of money, University of Penn here in Philadelphia. A student body asked me to speak. And the way the invitation came out, I thought I was the only one speaking. So I pulled another person from my group to, you're going to speak with me, we're going to speak together. And I asked them for an honorarium because they didn't offer. I knew they didn't have money because they were a student body. Most student bodies don't have money, but it was an Ivy League school, so I said, well, I'll take a chance. And then when we got onto the webinar, all these fabulous people were there. People from Black AIDS Institute, from Sister Love. I'm like, what? It was like a reunion, and it was wonderful. And I don't know why I thought I was the only one, but I thought that I'm thinking I'm the only one going to be on here speaking. Come on, I'm gonna bring you with me. And it was like a reunion. And I think they had more fun just watching us, like, say hi to each other, because we hadn't seen each other since the epidemic.
Mhm.
So yeah, so most of the times people will offer you, it should be somewhere around 125, right? And if not, then I could say, well, well, my internet, it like costs like $90 a month. I mean, so you got to figure out, it's okay to say, I mean, well, yeah. And I just want to add one thing. I'm the same way about when it comes to people, when researchers ask us to be on clinical trials and studies.
Mhm.
I think that they should, I think it's ethical to offer people an amount that's going to at least help them pay the cell phone bill. You can get cell phone bills nowadays around $40 a month. So I think that we're worth it, and so yeah. And as like I said, the highest I've ever been paid, let me say this, I'm going to say this to you, the highest I've ever been paid is $1,500. And that was from it wasn't an Ivy League school, but it was a university. You know what I'm saying? So you just never know. And I didn't ask. That was advocated for. But yeah, but I think that everybody, somebody said I'm worth every penny. I love you too, Tammy. Yeah, but yeah, but if they don't ask you, it's okay to ask them. And it's not like you have prices. And if you could do this through an organization will, if you're in a speaker's pool at an organization, the organization will make sure that when people ask for speakers, that they would, make sure that you get something that's equal to what your experience is.
Yeah. Okay. I totally agree with that.
Someone just said something in the chat box. It was very interesting. I also think you should practice a step up. This is from Denise. She says, I also think you should practice a step up model. If you are asking 125 this year, to increase that to 175 next year. You're constantly growing and your coin should too. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that, Denise. So our next question asks, in telling your story, do you share if you would do anything differently?
I don't know if I've ever been asked that. What people generally want to ask me if I'm telling my story, some people will ask me two things. Where do you think it came from? Which I'm not going to address, which I never address. I don't care where it came from. I'm gonna tell you where it is. It's here. I don't do the monkey stories and all that stuff, right? And they will ask me sometimes, how did you get it? And again, it doesn't matter how I got it. What matters is, do I have what I need to navigate my life now with HIV? There's another teachable moment. I always turn around and talk about excess, right? Because it doesn't matter how I got it. There's no good HIV and bad HIV. Some people, I just put it like this: HIV does not discriminate. Even if you think you're in a monogamous relationship, you don't have to go get it. It can come in. It'll come to you. That doesn't mean the person who had multiple partners is a bad person, right? So I don't want to fuel stigma by saying that, I was innocent. We're all innocent. We're all innocent. And so that's the message that I give when people ask me about how did I contract HIV.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Mhm.
Okay, so our next question is, what is the best advice to anyone getting ready to speak to an audience that may have an indifference on the topic, i.e. a person who with HIV or living with HIV versus heterosexual persons?
Yeah. Okay, so again, values-based messaging. You can't go wrong. You can't go wrong when you appeal to the human spirit. You can't go wrong. When you talk about community, when you talk about good health, when you talk about redemption, those sort of things, you can't go wrong. And like I said, you may not pull them all the way over to your side, but if you can pull them toward the middle, then when you do that ask, they'll be willing to do something, right? So I think it's all about values-based messaging. All of us, okay, let me say this. When I was in Vienna and I made this speech in Vienna, I talked about discrimination. And I said during the speech, I too have faced stigma and discrimination, right? So I connected with the audience saying that I understand discrimination and stigma happens, but I put myself in there connecting with, I too have been a victim of discrimination and stigma. And when it comes to a heterosexual audience, and there's a speaker who does not identify as heterosexual, I think that's an opportunity, another teaching opportunity. These are teachable moments because we're more alike than we are different, right? And I think as long as we look for the similarities and not the difference, that we'll be okay. I've spoken to many audience that are not, and I identify as a heterosexual woman, right? But I was at an event night before last Tuesday night with a room full of women of trans experience. This is my community, right? And we talk about, and so I'm able to connect because I'm real. I'm able to connect because I'm real, because I think that HIV has shown me the humanness in all of us. That's what I got out of my HIV diagnosis, is that I was able to tap into my human spirit. And I believe that anybody who's marginalized, we together. Anybody who's marginalized, anybody who doesn't have access to what they need, I can relate to those people, you know, because we all under the same systemic oppression. There's systemic oppression that all of us, and there's enough to go around for everybody. And so they have us fighting at each other when over the crumbs, when they have the huger hunks of things. So I think those are teachable moments when you're speaking to an audience that's not of the same gender or the same sexuality. Those are teachable moments, and again, an opportunity to pull people at least to the middle.
Beautifully, beautifully said. The H stands for human, as Eric put in our chat box. Okay, so it looks like we have one more question for you, Wahida. And after this question, we'll definitely give you your afternoon back. This has been such a wonderful topic. How do you speak with people of faith who has negative ideas and thought about people living with HIV?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I think these have all been great questions. This is my favorite question. When I speak to people of faith, I have to talk about the root cause analysis of HIV. And when I say the root cause analysis, I'm not talking about those monkeys. I'm talking about the factors that you can't separate from HIV. Poverty, homelessness, not being able to read, incarceration, no parents, defunded substance abuse programs, all these things that connect with HIV, that the fact is, and I try to teach, and I try to say to them, I do like this when I talk about sex now, right? That's sex. I used to do, that thing where you put the whole one, I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore. People with faith don't like that. They would go with this, like the toss them. When I say sex, I say, like, listen, this does not start an epidemic. What starts the epidemic is the same people that was homeless when I was 12 are still on the same corner homeless now, and now I'm an older adult. Poverty hasn't been addressed all my life, right? And so I talked to them about the different factors that that impact HIV. And I also quote scripture. See, because I'm a Christian Muslim. I was raised in the Christian faith. I converted to Islam when I was 19, right? But I also know scripture, and I'm also able to say scripture from this book and say scripture from this book, and they're saying the same when it comes to people, when it comes to helping people who are sick. It talks about feeding people when they were hungry. It talked about giving people a drink when they were thirsty. It talked about going to see people who are sick, visiting the sick. It talked about visiting people who are incarcerated. And it talks about there's a reward. There's a reward when we do these things for these people. And I remember there's one passage, and I don't want to get too religious, but there's one passage in Matthew, I think it's 27. And Jesus is saying to his disciples, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was sick, you visited me. And the disciples were like, well, how could we do these things for you? When you're the master, how could we? And Jesus said to them, when you did it for the least of mine, you did it for me. And I like quoting that to Christians because Christians know that. And I like saying the same thing to Muslims because there's also passages in the Muslim, not in the Quran, but in something called the Hadith that talks about so-and-so was sick. Why did you not visit him? So-and-so was thirsty. Why did you not give him drink? Didn't you know, had you visited him, you would have found me there with him, with your reward? Again, there's a reward for visiting people who are sick. So that's what I would do. I would, talking to people of faith, I would first of all let them know a couple people having sex doesn't start an epidemic. What starts the epidemic is a government who ignores human rights issues. That's what starts the epidemic, right? And also that we have a charge as people of faith, right? If we are people of faith, our charge is to support people who are sick, and it doesn't matter what their condition is. Our charge is to lay hands on everybody. So I just have to I would remind them of what our charges are as people of faith, right, going forward. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that information. Thank you for that response. Thank you for this presentation, Wahida. It has been, like I said, it really helped me as someone who wants to do more public speaking. I know that it was a blessing for others. So how, if the audience want to get in contact with you one more time, what is your social media handle?
I'm putting in the chat box right now.
Okay.
Spell Wahida, the legend.
Okay.
Email.com. PWN gave me that name when I retired from PWN a couple of years ago. And now they just call me Legend. They don't even call me Wahida. Hey, Legend.
So that's how it starts. So legendary Wahida. Legendary Wahida. We have
I
for
really
today.
appreciate you inviting me to do what I love doing, Tariq.
Mm-hmm. Thank
which
you.
is teaching folks and sharing what I've learned with other people. I really appreciate the Black AIDS Institute for collaborating with What's in the Mirror on this wonderful series. It's been a wonderful Empower series was the right name. And I hope people are leaving here feeling more empowered than when they got here. I just hope I was able to give somebody something they could use.
Yes, and I'm sure you did. And we definitely want to thank everyone who showed up today, everyone who's continuously have supported the Power Series. Of course, we have one last installment that will be happening next month, the third Thursday of every month. So our finale, this has been a great journey. Of course, continue to support What's in the Mirror, follow What's in the Mirror on all social media platforms, and as well as the Black AIDS Institute, and continue to support and follow the legendary Wahida as well. So you guys, thank you again and have a great afternoon.